This is the story of Rumpelstiltskin. There once was a miller who was poor, but he had a very beautiful daughter. One day he came to speak with the king and give himself consequence. He told him that he had a daughter who could spin gold out of straw. And the king said to the miller, "That is an art that pleases me well. If thy daughter is as clever as you say, bring her to my castle tomorrow, that I may put her to the proof." When the girl was brought to him, he led her into a room that was quite full of straw, and gave her a wheel and spindle, and said, "Now set to work, and if by the early morning thou hast not spun the straw and straw to gold, thou shalt die." He shut the door behind himself, and left her there alone. The poor miller's daughter was left there sitting, and could not think what to do for herself. So she set into motion, and set to work to spin gold from straw. And in her distress grew so great that she began to weep. Then all at once the door opened, and in came a little man who said, "Good evening, miller's daughter. Why are you crying?" "Oh," answered the girl, "I have got to spin gold out of straw, and I don't understand the business." "What will you give me if I spin it for you?" he asked. The girl said, "My necklace." The little man took the necklace, seated himself before the wheel, and whir, 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 3 times round, and the bobbin was full. Then he took up another, and whir, 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 3 times round, and that was full. And so he went on till the morning, and until all the straw had been spun, and all the bobbins were full of gold. At sunrise came the king, and when he saw all the gold, he was astonished. The next night he set the miller's daughter in another room that was even more full of straw. And when she was left in there alone, she began to weep again. And in came the little man, and he said, "What will you give me if I spin this straw into gold?" She said, "The ring off my finger." And the little man took the ring and began again to send the wheel whirling around. And by the next morning all the straw was turned into gold. The next night the king again left her in a bigger room with more straw. And he told her, "This too must be spun in one night, and if you accomplish it, you shall become my wife." For he thought, although she is the miller's daughter, I am not likely to find any more richer in the whole world. Soon the girl was left alone, and she began to weep again. And in came the little man, and again he said, "What will you give me if I spin this straw into gold?" She said, "I have nothing left to give." He said, "Then you must promise me the first child you have after you are queen." And she said, "But who knows whether that will happen?" But she did not know what else to do, and so she promised the little man what he desired. And then he began to spin, and he spun all the straw into gold by the next morning. And in 1 year's time, when she brought a child into the world, she didn't think about the little man. But one day he came suddenly into her room and said, "Now give me what you promised me." The queen was terrified greatly, and offered the little man all the riches of the kingdom if he would only leave the child. But the little man said, "No, I would rather have something living than all the treasures of the world." Then the queen began to lament and to weep, so that the little man would have pity upon her. He told her that he would give her 3 days, and if she could figure out what his name was by the end of the 3 days, then the child would be left with her. The queen spent the whole first night thinking over all the names she had ever heard, and she sent messengers to the land to ask far and wide the names that could be found. But when the little man came the next day, she began with Casper and Balthazar. She repeated all she knew and went through the whole list, but after each the little man said, "That is not my name." The second day the queen sent to inquire of all the neighbors of the servants that were called. When the little man came, she said, "Perhaps you are called roast ribs, or sheep shanks, or spindle shanks." But he answered nothing but, "That is not my name." The third day came, and the messenger came back again. "I have not been able to find one single new name. But as I passed through the woods, I came to a high hill, and near it was a little house, and before the house burned a fire, and round the fire danced a comical little man, and he hopped on one leg and cried, 'Today do I bake, tomorrow I brew. The day after that the queen's child comes in.' And oh, I am glad that nobody knew that the name I am called is Rumpelstiltskin." You cannot know how pleased the queen was to hear that name. Soon afterwards the little man came in. He said, "Now, Mrs. Queen, what is my name?" She said at first, "Are you called Jack?" He said, "No." "Are you called Harry?" He said, "No." And then she said, "Then perhaps your name is Rumpelstiltskin." "The devil told you that. The devil told you that," he said. And in all of his anger, he stamped the ground, and his right foot went through the ground because he stamped so hard. And then he shoved his hand on his knee and then seized his left foot with both of his hands in such a fury that he split in two, and there was the end of him.